How have you been? Everybody good down there in South?
I'm doing well, man. Yeah.
Are you based in South Florida still?
Down in Fort Lauderdale. So
Okay.
Yeah, I am. So, if we're going to deal with COVID, might as well do it in the warmth.
Okay. So, what's with the Tua distaste? Is that prevalent in South Florida because they saw that he struggled, or what is the general sense of Dolphins fandom as you live down there and sense it, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that there's actually more patience locally than maybe it feels like nationally. I think there's a sense down here. In fact, it's interesting to me. There's a pretty strong contingent of fans that when you bring up Deshaun Watson and what they'd have to give up, to get him, that get pretty defensive for Tua. So I understand nationally the narrative definitely is that, can he really handle it? The Dolphins should upgrade. But I do think that I sense that this is a group down here that kind of saw enough potential to where they feel like he deserves at least another year to kind of grow into the role.
Yeah, I mean, my gosh. I mean, the guy had his hip reattached, right? I know I'm exaggerating. But then he's drafted by the team that wanted him all along. They move him along pretty darn fast. I guess what would be his high water mark? Was it that game against Kyler Murray where he was so dynamite on the road? Is that what it was?
Yes.
And
no question.
Right?
No question.
And then, let's give him a shot. Give him a couple more weapons and see how it goes. I would think, unless Deshaun Watson strolls along, then I would pull the trigger on that in a heartbeat.
Right.
That's just my 2 cents.
So I don't even think, Rich, we'd be having the conversation if not for the Watson potential availability. I don't think it's a conversation with, the Russell Wilson stuff. Like, you don't see Dolphins fans getting up about that. The idea of a 25-year-old elite quarterback and Deshaun Watson being potentially available and seemingly having the ammunition to be able to make it happen, I think is what creates that intrigue. But otherwise, we would be saying, you know what, it was his first year. By the way, I mean, towards the end of the season, all of his wide receivers were hurt. He had no running backs. Like, he really wasn't working with very much. I do understand both sides of it. This is an organization that has been a bit snake bitten, to say the least. Watching Ryan Tannehill get comeback player of the year while you're also trying to develop your young quarterback. There's a lot going on down here. There's a lot of angst that these people have gone through when it comes to that QB spot.
And so, what is the Watson situation, best you can tell? My colleagues still at the NFL Media Group, your former ones, and Weich and Jim Trotter had Jalen Ramsey on their Huddle and Flow podcast, and they share an agent, and Jalen's like, I'm highly doubtful he's ever going to take another snap for them again. Where does that stand here at the end of at the end of the first week of March, on the eve of a ton of cuts to come with a smaller cap and then the new league year beginning? Where does that stand? Jeff?
I was talking to an executive 2 days ago who was saying that they truly, and this is an executive of a quarterback-needy team, that was essentially saying they truly do believe that Caserio, the GM in Houston, is not taking phone calls, that he is remaining with his feet in the cement. Now, the caveat there is that this person then says, wait until a week before the draft. So I think the expectation is that they sense that Houston has no reason to jump at this point, that there's a belief that Watson will eventually be available, that he will wind up playing for another team, but that Houston is merely trying to wait this thing out, whether for leverage or public relations reasons. But the one thing I think is important to point out here, I find it fascinating. Like, right now, there's a sense around the league that Russell Wilson will not be available. If Russell Wilson, though, suddenly does become available, if things really degenerate in Seattle to the point where he's on the market, to me, Houston starts to lose some leverage. Because right now, supply and demand is Watson gets whatever – they can get whatever they want for Watson. But suddenly, if the Bears, for instance, were to say, you know what, if you won't take our offer for Watson, we'll go offer the same thing for Russell. So suddenly that changes. To me, that is the only sense of urgency, if I was Nick Caserio, that I would have in regards to when I should pull the trigger on a Watson trade.
Right, but public relations, I mean, again, this is unlike anything we've ever seen Jeff. We've seen a lot of firsts.
I agree.
From a 43-year-old quarterback after 20 years with one team, winning a Super Bowl in a pandemic with a new one in just his first shot. That's for starters. Goff and Wentz being traded with big, huge, fat contracts, both of them gone. So, and two guys that signed those big deals under the new construct, which is still relatively new with collective bargaining agreement, just only less than 10 years old, or it turns the first one that just getting renewed turns 10 this year. So we've seen a lot of firsts, right? So I've never seen anything like this where it's he's 25, right? 26, Deshaun Watson. And he's got a huge fat contract that he just signed a year ago. He says he doesn't want to play for the team anymore, and it's not contractual, it's not money, it's prideful because of who owns the team apparently, or who the owner has brought on as a character coach to run the team. And so you've got that, and then you've got on top of it, he's got the no trade clause. So you've got to be partners with him.
That's right.
In this thing, so they could make this trade all they want, and then he could say, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that." So they've got to run it up his flagpole essentially, and they've got to work together to make it all work out. So the cement and PR aspect of it that this executive told you, Jeff, includes sort of making Deshaun look like the malcontent at some point when when an OTA hits and he doesn't show up. You know what I mean? Like when off-season workout program starts, he's supposed to be there and he's not, or if he is, then there's going to be a microphone in front of his face. This is not just going to stay as quiet as it's going to stay. I've never seen anything like it. And I don't quite understand it when there are two teams in the AFC East that you could play off against each other, right? And there's Tapper as well. You're saying the Bears are in this? Like, what are they going to give them the lease to Soldier Field? Like, what do they have to cough up?
Well, so to your point, I do not think that the PR spin changes. I don't think the tide shifts to where Deshaun is suddenly the one that gets blamed, especially given everything that has happened when you look at how many people have left the organization, from Hopkins to, even guys that, Texans fans say, Bill O'Brien, we did want to see him fired. Brian Gain, the GM, who was largely unproven. Amy Polsick, who is a PR person, widely popular, but probably to fans, not somebody that's all that well known. But the sum of all of that creates this dissension within the organization to where the tide is not going to change. And Deshaun Watson will remain in favorable light. But to your point, when it comes to the potential suitors, a team like the Bears, the way it was presented to me was, you've got a GM in Nick Caserio who's trying to build the organization, right? So he's going to covet future picks more so than maybe a GM that's on the hot seat. Whereas in Chicago, you got Ryan Pace, who, if he doesn't get a quarterback, he's done. So there's a lot of people around the league who think that compensation could not just merely be this year, but future year first-round picks, because that's something that Houston would covet and that a team that desperately needs a quarterback might not. So I think at the end of the day, I don't know if it's Chicago, but I think that we see a situation where he is sent for a mammoth package that is all about future compensation.
Jeff Darlington here on the Rich Eisen Show. You said on Get Up this week that the Russell Wilson-Pete Carroll relationship reminds you of the Brady-Belichick relationship. I'll give you the floor here. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, and the funny thing is, it's not necessarily the relationship that people think they know of Belichick and Brady of the last year, where a year ago there was a lot of talk about these guys needing to go through kind of the equivalent of marriage counseling. They needed to sit down and hash it out, and there was this expectation that the meeting was going to happen. That meeting never happened. The relationship was already dead. With Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, I think the comparison is more like 7-8 years ago, Belichick-Brady, when it was never really all that great. Like, it was always this pretty cold relationship between them, but it worked. And they were able to weather some storms behind the scenes, certainly not as public as what we saw last year, nor as public as what Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson are seemingly enduring right now. But 7 or 8 years ago, when they were going through this, they had someone in Robert Kraft helping to sort of mediate. I think that Russell and Pete are now in that phase of their relationship, that 7 or 8 years ago relationship of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. If they can weather this, if they can sit down and figure this out, they've got plenty of years together that they can still succeed. My question is, do they have somebody that can help mediate this, that can help both sides see some compromise? Because Paul Allen, the late Paul Allen, he was pretty hands-off even when he was around with the team. Now it's not even that. So my big hesitation about whether Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson can get through this is whether or not they have someone to help them do it. Well, there's a lot of egos involved, and I don't know.
Well, I've got Macklemore on in hour 3. Should I ask him? I mean, you
should ask him. I would be very curious to see what Macklemore is surprisingly, that guy's, you know what's funny, Rich? You want to hear a funny story?
Go for it.
I was, remember the NFC Championship game in Seattle?
Yeah.
The place was absolutely rocking. I'm on the sideline waiting to do our post-game interview. Macklemore's with his whole crew. They're playing Macklemore over the speakers, and he drops his keys, and he starts to, run out onto the field, and his keys are sitting there. I have to pick up his keys and, chase down Macklemore and be like, "Hey, bro, you dropped your keys." He's like, "Thanks, man." It was the most random run-in I've ever had with someone of that stature, and I feel like he was appreciative.
I think we're seeing a photograph of him celebrating with Russell Wilson after that very game. We're seeing on the screen right there. But,
yeah.
I drop his name just not only promotionally, but just in a way to throw it into the next question of so what is on the agenda list of this marriage counseling? What is there? We could have always sensed what was between Brady and Belichick. Brady being like, "Hey, listen to me a little bit more," and Belichick saying, "Oh, I don't know what his 2 cents would possibly be, but what would be on the agenda list here?" That's why they're in counseling. But what is the counseling here between Pete and Russ? What's on the list here to go through?
Not that very different from what you just cited. Hey man, you gotta. I just want you to listen to me a little bit more about this offensive line and what we got going here, and trying to fix it. Listen to what you think about what I like about this offense. It's not that different from what Brady was going through. And Brady, like Russell, is a really good soldier, the ultimate soldier, to be honest. So it's not like a malcontent. I think that a lot of times these organizations do need to realize, as Jason Light deserves a lot of credit. Jason Light last year, people want it to be like, "Oh, Tom's running the show in Tampa." And it's like, why? Because he made some suggestions that Jason Light listened to? It is obviously a pretty thin line. You don't want to all of a sudden just allow your quarterback to be assistant GM. But if you have a longtime veteran who is obviously successful at their craft, maybe it's worth paying attention to them. And I think that would be Russell's argument. Now, Belichick, for instance, we joke, but he was basically like, "No, I'll handle it. You go do your job." Literally, do your job. And that weighed on the relationship, but again, Robert Kraft was there at times when it probably would have been too fractured to continue, to say, "No, Tom is our quarterback. He's sticking around. Bill, make this work." And they ultimately did. Again, who's going to do that for Pete and Russ? I don't know. That's my big question. Who is going to help mediate these egos through this situation to where there's some compromise on both sides?
Jeff Darlington here on the Rich Eisen Show, and while we're all focused on the quarterback carousel, free agency, I'm wondering if the first that we mentioned just a few minutes ago, again, we've never seen quarterbacks in the current world where quarterbacks are slotted in the draft monetarily. Right. We've never seen a quarterback, let alone two, sign a monster contract, earn it. That was the idea of the new collective bargaining agreement. Instead of giving all that money sight unseen upon drafting, let's see what they can do for at least 3-4 years, and then now the teams are on the hook for that generationally wealthy contract. We've never seen two quarterbacks sign those big deals and then fall out of favor. One of them just kind of fall apart in Wentz, and then another in Goff fall out of favor. Is that going to affect the quarterback class that's kind of up right now for long-term deals? Mayfield, Lamar, Josh Allen. Those are the three as we're talking about right now. Is that going to be a copycat sort of situation here in the NFL?
So I think this is one of the more fascinating narratives that it sort of exists. You know, if you're a bit of a football nerd, I don't know if everyday fans care as much about this, but this whole option situation with these quarterbacks, to your point, like an organization wants to make the most of a rookie, a quarterback on a rookie deal. Talking about Russell Wilson, like when did he win the Super Bowl? He's on that rookie deal. So the question though is, how do you balance the line between the Wentz-Goff situation and Dak Prescott situation? Because here we are hammering the Cowboys. How are they not signing Dak? Well, the problem is they missed the window. Had they signed him going into that fourth year, they probably could have, it might have felt rich at the time, but it would have been a pretty normal contract for a guy who continued to succeed. And on the other side of it, though, we talk about extending too early with Wentz. Like, remember when Wentz signed that deal? We're like, wait, what? I didn't even know, I remember when he signed that, I was like, wow, I had no idea that this was even, close to where they would consider that. It was so early. So there has to be a balance, and it's such a tightrope that it happened with Kirk Cousins. Scott McLuhan, I remember the GM at the time, told me that with Cousins, we missed the window. It got to the point where he outplayed what we could offer him and what he was going to earn in free agency. We missed the window. It feels like the Cowboys have missed the window. You got to time it right. There is a tipping point, and I don't know what that is. It's each team's going to deal with it, but there's a tipping point with Baker, with Lamar, with Josh, and you got to time it right.
Are they going to get it this year? Are they going to get it right now? What do you think?
So I think that Baker is not quite there. That's a dangerous one. I could see the Bills doing, like Josh Allen, I think will be on the earlier end. But I don't get the sense that there was any significant talks, for instance, with Baker yet. And I would say that that's one of those dangerous ones, man, because if he comes in and plays lights out this season, all of a sudden, did you miss the window? It's such a tough game for these GMs to have to play.
Well, Lamar, hasn't he shown already? I'm just, wondering if Wentz and Goff have gotten these general managers a little bit sort of gun-shy on putting something big, fat on the table.
Probably. Think about Lamar. Lamar, MVP of the league, but then, on the other side, you're sitting there saying, you think about the playoff situation. And more than likely he's going to get over that and grow and develop and prove his value. But if you've seen what happened with Wentz and Goff to a little bit of a different degree, to your point, it's tough to pull the trigger, and that these quarterbacks aren't sitting there saying, I'm willing to give you a discount to do it early. So it's just such a tightrope to walk, and probably the biggest challenge. I would argue the biggest challenge that a general manager has to face when they draft a good quarterback.
Last one for you. I say this respectfully. Why isn't Drew Brees retired yet? Because we all thought he would, or we're all assuming. Still? It's
a little weird. I was talking to somebody in New Orleans who said they're just waiting on Drew. The bookkeeping is done, I'm sure you know that his $25 million salary has been reduced to the minimum. The bookkeeping says he's retired, basically. So I don't know if it's just something where Drew wants to wait it out to where maybe there can be a little bit more pomp and circumstance to it, but the Saints are just waiting on Drew, and I think, they're acting behind the scenes as if he's retired. But, when we go see these videos of him pushing the sled, looking like he's getting ready for 2021, right. And what we've already described as a wacky offseason, I think we're all sitting here saying, what's exactly going on here?
Maybe Drew's got the bookkeeper, right? Maybe he's hopped the train in Chicago and he's got the bookkeeper, just like the Untouchables. Maybe he's found the bookkeeper, and we'll never see we'll put the bookkeeper on the stand and we'll keep this thing going. I have no idea,
I got to be honest. I root for chaos. So I'm all for it.
By the way, you're like, didn't Louis Riddick say that? Like, let's keep it going. It's something to talk about. That's what he said yesterday. Oh, my gosh. Thanks for the call, Jeff. Really appreciate it. You be well. We'll chat soon.
Rich. Appreciate it always.
You got it. Same at Jeff Darlington on Twitter. I follow him. You should too. Right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.